Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new video. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about Japan, South Korea, its trade deals, and also I'm going to be talking about Germany. Germany is complaining about China firing a laser at them. So without further ado, let's start. And also, guys, don't forget to watch the video from start to end and comment and like. It does help the algorithm. That's the only thing that pushes these videos out. So let's start. So Japan and South Korea are absolutely reeling, and they have had a letter from Trump today. So this letter by Trump is asking them to pay a 25% um, tariff on all their goods unless they come up with a deal before August the 1st, which is less than a month. So first of all, I wanted to kind of show you this letter, and this letter is an absolute joke, by the way. This is the letter he sent. And this letter is 528 words long, and he has 20 grammatical errors. And these errors are basically spelling, um, sentences not correct. He's put capitals where it should be lowercase. And, and people have found these absolutely. I mean, these are official letters sent from one country to another. And you would imagine that they would actually get their grammar correct and spelling and all the. It's almost like it's written by a child of 3. In fact, it wasn't actually written by a child of 3. I think this was written by Trump because the format of the letter is very similar to what he writes on social media. And on social media, I don't know if many of you have seen his social media posts, but sometimes he puts capitals instead of lowercase. Sometimes gets his spelling wrong. Sometimes he put explanation marks. So it's all over the place, really. And this is a man who is clearly not educated. He's clearly born with a silver spoon in his mouth, parents giving him lots of money and power. And this is someone who's definitely not educated. I mean, even a 5-year-old can type better than this. I mean, this is embarrassing. This is you're sending it to another country. This is an official letter to another country. You're not sending it to, you know, your friend, or anything like that. It's just embarrassing in the world stage, embarrassing. So let's go back to Japan and South Korea. So I've also read today that Samsung has released their profits. And Samsung's profits have gone down by half compared to last year. Half of its profits are gone. I mean, this is alarming stuff from South Korea. From Samsung, which is South Korea's largest company. And Samsung is pretty much 60-70% of South Korea's GDP. So this is how powerful Samsung is. And their profits have gone down by half. I mean, this is cause for major, major alarm. And these 25% tariffs will absolutely kill Samsung completely because Samsung still makes a lot of their goods in South Korea and they export it to United States. United States is their main customer and Japan as well. It's not China anymore. And it's not China anymore because South Korea stupidly decided to go along with Trump and Biden's sanctions against China. So South Korea is not allowed to sell any high-end chips to China. They're not allowed to sell high-end GPUs, memory chips, equipment. They're not allowed to make make Huawei chips. Um, high-end stuff is they're not allowed to sell to China, and they're not even allowed to build factories in China because that's how much of these sanctions have hit South Korea. And if you look at I mean, those of you, I'm sure all of you guys are intelligent, but if you look at the map, South Korea and China are pretty much neighbors. So it makes sense to have your biggest trading partner, you know, as your neighbor. I mean, why have all these sanctions against your neighbor? It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So South Korea becoming loyal puppets like they are, and now have been hit by a 25% tariff. I mean, obviously these tariffs are not they haven't started, but they will start in August the 1st, and there is no way in hell they can agree to a trade deal before August the 1st. And South Korea has been loyal servants to the Americans for years now, years, and they have been doing things to antagonize China for a number of years. And I remember the times when South Korea first bought a THAAD missile system from America, and they were pointing it at China. And and because they put it under some land that Lotte owned. Lotte is a supermarket in South Korea. So Lotte allowed this THAAD missile system to be put into their land, pointing at China. So what China did, they banned Lotte from China, which is rightfully, good thing to do. And he's just been going on from there, guys. I mean, sometimes, and the last president of South Korea was an absolute anti-Chinese, puppet. He was famously going to the United States and singing for Biden like a clown jester, like a clown fool, singing in front of the White House and everybody laughing at the little Asian man, singing for Biden, entertaining the white men. So again, and somebody asked him about going to China and working out some trade deals. And he famously said, "Why doesn't China come to us?" And because of his attitude, there was a really anti-Chinese feeling in South Korea, and this is one of the reasons he managed to get himself fired. And because the economy wasn't doing very well, you know, China was China was forced to become self-reliant because they couldn't buy these memory chips and GPUs and semiconductors and equipment. China had to do their own. And then China started building their own ship industry. They took over South Korea's. They took over every single South Korean industry. For 20 or 30 years, South Korea had a surplus against China, which means South Korea was selling more goods to China than China was selling to South Korea. And it was until last year that China suddenly had a trade surplus against South Korea for the first time in its history, which means China is selling more goods to South Korea than South Korea was selling to China. So obviously, South Korean's economy is going down the pan recently. Cost of living has gone through the roof. Inflation's gone through the roof. I know South Korea very well because I lived there for 2 years. So I follow a lot of South Korean politics. I still have a lot of friends in South Korea, and I still contact them. They tell me what life is like over there. And when I was there, things were very good. The economy was booming. People used to, after work, people used to go out drinking because drinking was so cheap. They had soju. Soju was absolutely cheap back in the day. Food was cheap. Everything was cheap. Everything was good. People were out, drinking, partying after work. Everyone was socializing. It doesn't happen anymore, apparently. Apparently, everything's gone so expensive and everybody's working so hard. Nobody's got time to go out anymore and drink with their colleagues. It's basically, cost of living has gone through the roof. People are working 2 jobs, 3 jobs, and people are depressed. And, it's just gone crazy in South Korea at the moment. And it looks the same in Japan as well. Japan is also suffering the same. And Japan's got nobody to blame but themselves. For years they have been loyal servants to the Americans. Back in the excuse me, back in the 80s when they agreed the Plaza Accord, and at the time, Japanese economy was booming, and I remember the Americans were absolutely scared. They thought that Japan would easily take over and become the world's #1 economy, beating American economy. And Japan's economy was flying. They were making their own semiconductors. They were making their own technology which was better than American technology. They were making their own cars and consoles, you name it. All the latest technology and gadgets were coming out of Japan. And the Americans got really scared. And what do? They have a meeting in a Plaza hotel. They call it the Plaza Accord, and they start messing around with the currencies. And the Japanese reluctantly agreed. And and ever since then, they the economy has been stagnant, non-moving, and it's been gradually getting worse and worse. And it's come to a point now where Japan's economy is on a knife edge. It could collapse any moment. The yen is in really dire straits at the moment. The Japanese bond market is falling. People's lives are really difficult in Japan. Cost of living, there's not enough jobs. Inflation's running through the roof. I mean, there's so many problems in Japan economy at the moment. And now with these tariffs against Japan and South Korea, I think these two countries are going to totally collapse if these tariffs start happening, because because this is what's going to happen when Trump starts putting these tariffs on Japan and South Korea, and Japan and South Korea won't be able to sell much products to America, which is their biggest market. They've already lost the Chinese market. They cannot sell it in the Chinese market anymore. I mean, it's too late for them now. And it will be pretty much over. So Japan and South Korea will be forced to retaliate. And I don't think they will retaliate because America is their master and these are like loyal puppets at the moment. And I don't think they will retaliate. And even if they do, it's going to affect their own economy anyway. Trump will probably retaliate against them again. Um, and they just got themselves to blame, guys. I mean, all these years they've been loyal servants to the Americans. I mean, they've not diversified. They've not had the balls to stand up for themselves. When Americans tell them to sanction Chinese companies, they should just stand up and say, "No, we're not going to sanction Chinese companies. They're our neighbors. They're our biggest trading partner. Why should we do that? It's not in our interest to do it." They should have just had the balls to do that, and then they would have had some respect, not only from the West but also from China, from the global South. These countries have never ever had their own balls to do what they want, and now they're suffering. I mean, America has been using these countries, to squeeze as much money from them as possible. These two countries are under huge debt at the moment, huge debt, and compared to their GDP, they are in bigger trouble than United States because, first of all, the South Korean won and the Japanese yen are not world reserve currencies. So they are in major, major trouble here. And the Americans got them, to follow their system, go on super, super debt, and now these countries are absolutely, struggling now. So Americans have been using South Korea and Japan as a way to kind of make money out of them, squeeze them dry until they've got nothing left, which is now they've got absolutely nothing left. Now America will just toss them aside, like they normally do to countries they don't need or want anymore. They'll just toss them aside, same way they've done that to Ukraine, Afghanistan, you name it. When America doesn't find you useful anymore, they will toss you aside like an ex-girlfriend. So again, they have nothing to do. They basically have no one to blame but themselves. Going forward, I think if they really want to, have their own policy, I think what they really should be doing is kicking out the American troops from South Korea and Japan, start making friends with China, Russia, and their neighbors. Start cutting ties with America. Say, you know what, you guys are, sanctioning us, you're tariffing us. We are your long-term allies. Is this how you're going to treat us? So we're going to cut all links from you. I mean, just have some balls and do that. And Trump is a guy that he likes strength. He doesn't like weak countries or weak leaders. If you stand up to Trump, he will back down. The same way, the same as China stood up to him. All these other, any other like Yemen stood up to him. He mentioned famously that he respects the Yemenis. He also said he respects Iran for causing so much damage to Israel. A couple of weeks ago, he was saying that unconditional surrender to Iran. Oh, well, yes, Israel's going to destroy Iran. He's going to bomb them to smithereens. He was coming up with all these like words. He was like, oh, Iran's going to surrender. And then suddenly, when Iran fought back, suddenly, we want a ceasefire, we want peace. Well, he changes his tunes very quickly. But you have to show him strength. You cannot show him any sort of weakness, and that's what Trump responds to. So if these countries suddenly start showing some strength, cut all ties with America, retaliate with these tariffs and say, you know what, we're going to cancel all our semiconductor restrictions to China. We're going to start selling to China. We're going to start opening up high-end factories in China. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? Tariff us again? I think if these countries show a bit more balls and do that, then Trump would respect them instead of being, puppets. So I want to talk about Vietnam as well. So Vietnam recently agreed to a deal with America. Initial thoughts, it doesn't look like a good deal for Vietnam. Initial thoughts, because what they agreed to was Trump going to add 20% tariffs on Vietnamese goods and 40% if these are Chinese goods going via Vietnam. So if it's a Chinese company shipping via Vietnam to America, then they will be 40%. And in return, Vietnam will open up their economy to American goods, and you're going to see loads of Starbucks, Burger King, McDonald's everywhere, all over Vietnam. So, and they're going to do it with zero tariffs. So initially, it doesn't sound very good. I mean, personally, I'm a bit 50-50, to be honest. I think Vietnam should have fought more. Um, I think they should have fought more. They should have retaliated, 20% versus 20%. Trump would have respected them, or he would have backed down, because America buys a lot of Vietnamese goods. They have pretty much you know sanctioned a lot of Chinese companies, so they buy a lot of stuff from Vietnam. Vietnam is probably one of the most countries they import from. The top one is, I believe, it's Canada, Mexico, or is it Mexico, Canada, then China, then comes Vietnam. So it's in the top five anyway. And I think Vietnam should have fought a bit more. But then I also started thinking about, hang on a second, Vietnam is still a poor country. And are they really going to buy any American goods? Because any American goods going into Vietnam, Vietnamese have got a choice, right? They can buy, American goods, or they can buy Chinese goods, or they can buy local goods. And I think the local goods will still be cheaper than American goods. Like things are still cheap in Vietnam, food and and lots of other stuff as well. Well, when it comes to high-end stuff like TVs and phones and high-end manufacturing equipment, they rather buy that from China, because China is the neighbor, and it would be much cheaper to buy it from China because they don't have to worry about the shipping costs and things like that. So I don't think Vietnamese will buy too much American goods anyway, so it might not matter. But in the future, it might matter. So, for example, if suddenly Vietnamese become extremely rich in the next 10 years, then they'll probably start buying more American stuff. And also, there's a lot of Vietnamese living in Vietnam who are pro-Western as well. So they rather buy pro-Western stuff. So I'm still a bit 50-50 with this Vietnamese deal. And I think they should have fought a bit more, to be honest. They should have stuck to their guns, as you can say. So Trump has also threatened 10% tariffs on BRICS. And guess what? Um, guess what? Trump doesn't really think about these things when he says things. Sometimes Trump just blurts out words on his social media and stuff. He doesn't think about it. Then a few days later, he either gets a call from his bosses or thinks about it, and then he suddenly backs down. And this is why they call him Trump Taco. Trump always backs out. So the reason he hasn't thought about this is because together the BRICS countries, the GDP is higher than the G7. So if he puts a 10% tariffs on all these BRICS countries, what do you think BRICS is going to do in return? And and the main players in the BRICS, you have China and Russia. So if he puts 10% tariffs on China, what do you think is going to happen in return? China's not going to retaliate with 10% back. They will just cut off rare earths again. And imagine the last time when China cut off the rare earths against America. America started panicking. Trump started panicking. Oh, we need rare earths because they need rare earths for missiles and all the other things that they're running short of at the moment. They're running short of missiles in Ukraine, in Israel, and it's got so bad that they have stopped delivering weapons to Ukraine because they don't have any. And they need rare earths for missiles and all these Patriot missiles and all these bombs that Israel is dropping. So Trump doesn't really think about these things. So if he dares to put another 10% on China, China will retaliate. China's not gonna say 10% back. They'll just say, oh, you know what? We're just gonna start restricting rare earths again. And it's just that whole thing is gonna start again. The last time he started a trade war with China a few months ago, all the markets started dropping. All the S&P, Dow, everything started dropping. So he panicked and he had to back out basically. And the other person, 10%, he wants to put is Russia. You know, do you really think Russia cares about 10% tariff from America when America has basically you know sanctioned Russia to death? There is no more sanctions or tariffs they can put onto Russia that will scare them. None whatsoever. They have literally decoupled from each other. You know, there's no trade between America or Russia. Or there is a little bit of trade, but it's just not significant. So do you really think Russia's going to care about an extra 10% on all the sanctions they've had from Biden administration? No way. So the other countries in BRICS, you have Brazil. Brazil will fight back. They'll put another 10% back on United States, and that will start another trade war with their neighbor. And guess who the other player is in BRICS? It's India. So India and America have been trying to work out a trade deal, and India has been sucking up to the Americans. So imagine Trump suddenly started a trade war with India with Modi. That'll be so funny, right? So one hand, America needs India for Quad, and they need India for other stuff as well. They want to use India to fight China, for example. And yeah, so this 10% on India is not going to go down too well. So he hasn't really thought about these things. He doesn't really think about anything, to be honest. I mean, Trump is literally uh, he's illiterate. You can see by the way he writes, he's illiterate. He's not very clever. He says things that are you know, absolutely kind of crazy, and even like he says things without thinking, and almost like he doesn't use that piece of his brain to know what he's exactly saying. He's almost like it's almost I don't want to call him any names or anything like that, but he really doesn't think before he says anything. He's almost like yeah, I don't think he ever did, to be honest. I mean, watching his shows like Apprentice, I don't really watch his shows, but I've seen him a few times in it, and he seems to be very like low IQ, and he doesn't really know what's going on in the world. He's been given a gift of money. He knows the right people. He still managed to bankrupt himself 6 times, by the way. I think he'll bankrupt America the way he's going. Um, so I don't know about him, man. He seems very kind of low IQ. He's probably the lowest IQ president ever in the history of the United States, and I think he's going to cause a lot of damage. Anyway, let's go to the next one. So already, China issues a threat to Trump. Already, the reason China is issuing a threat because Donald Trump has been negotiating trade deals with countries which are where he wants them to stop trading with China or put roadblocks on trading with China. So, for example, with Vietnam, he's charging 40% of you know transit fees, tariffs that go through Vietnam into America. So these are 40% tariff for transit fees. Excuse me. And and Trump is doing the same to other countries as well. He's doing it with South Korea, Japan, and luckily they haven't agreed yet, but it looks like they might agree by August the 1st. If they do, then it'll be extremely stupid on their part, to be honest. But he's also doing it to other countries like United Kingdom. The deal he made with United Kingdom, there's a small print saying that any Chinese investment coming into UK has to go through United States first. Trump has to okay that first. So again, UK has given away its sovereignty for the sake of a silly little trade deal with America. So America is pretty much doing the same to all of Chinese neighbors. Basically they have to agree to this tariff. They have to agree to doing less business with China. They have to put some roadblocks for China. Basically this whole trade deal is about China. It's just anti-China everywhere. Obviously, he's not going to admit it, but you can see from this picture, he got China as number one. He put them right at the top, if you notice. You know, so who his main target is. It's all about, it's all about China. But he's going about it the wrong way. He's not doing things correctly. If he wants to target China, then he needs to make friends with the rest of the world, not hit them with a stick. So what he's doing is slapping all these tariffs on every single country around the world, saying, "All right, you got to pay 10%, you got to pay 20%, you got to pay 40%, you got to pay 60%, you got to pay 90%." But if you want a trade deal with me, then you got to do this by August the 1st. Otherwise, you have to pay 90%. You have to pay 40%. I mean, sounds like almost like mafia behavior. So this is the stuff that the mafia does in New York, where you have these mafias going from shop to shop. They break a few stuff, and they threaten these shopkeepers, saying that if you don't give us some money, we're going to come back the next day and break things even more, or start putting all these demands on them. So this is exactly what Trump is doing, mafia style, democracy, or diplomacy, you can say. It's just not going to work, guys. It's just not going to work. It's really utterly hilarious to watch, by the way. So let's talk about Germany here. So Germany accuses China of targeting one of its military aircraft with a laser. So this military aircraft was in the Red Sea doing spying, by the way. So they were obviously spying from Yemen, because the Red Sea is next to Yemen. And Yemen is obviously a friend of China. So China, is not very happy with America and its allies bombing Iranian nuclear sites, because if you blow up a nuclear site, it sets a really bad precedence, right, around the world. So imagine if all the countries started bombing each other's nuclear sites. Can you imagine how much nuclear fallout would be released in the atmosphere? And how many people would be affected? Billions and billions of people would be affected. So they are trying to normalize this, blowing up nuclear facilities, and they don't care about any fallout or radiation. It's absolutely sickening here, sickening. So Germany's been sending out spy planes in the Red Sea to obviously find sites to bomb Yemen and stuff like that. And normally you wouldn't mind a few planes flying through the air, but unfortunately for Germany, Germany's on the wrong side of history. So Mertz has recently said that the German Chancellor, he recently said that Israel is doing the dirty work for the West. They are, doing the right thing. You know, they have to defend themselves against Iran. Iran cannot have nuclear weapons, so we support Israel. And he's also said that he supports Israel's genocide. You know, Literally, this is a country who's done its own genocide against the Jews back in the day. He's talking like he's Hitler number two. I mean, can you imagine? This is the kind of language Hitler was talking back in the day. This is exactly the same language. Basically, you know, other countries are doing its dirty work and blowing up. It's fine to blow up a sovereign nation, blow up nuclear facilities. It's okay to do it, and then it's just absolutely kind of sick language from this guy who was basically, you know, he probably has relatives in from back in the day. I'm not going to say the name because it's going to be picked up by YouTube channel, but NAZ. I mean, I'm going to kind of stop there. So, I mean, this guy Merz is also a globalist as well. He used to work for BlackRock. BlackRock is owned by, a kind of Jewish oligarchs as well. And so he's pretty much a globalist. He will do whatever the globalists want him to. He will say whatever the globalists want him to say. But these kind of words that he's talking about, people are raising eyebrows here. And Germany is also rearming itself as well. They're using Russia as an excuse, and they're now rearming themselves. So imagine if Germany suddenly becomes rearmed. So, isn't the rest of Europe scared about it? Isn't the rest of the world scared about it? Because don't forget, they allowed, back in the day, I'm not going to say the name too much, but HRT they allowed him to, militarize Germany back in the day. The Europeans ignored it, Americans ignored it until it was too late. So once Germany became completely militarized, that's when all the world wars started and stuff like that. So again, it's happening now. Not only are they ignoring it, they're cheering it on. They're clapping and they're cheering it on. Say, yeah, Germany is going to spend more money on its GDP, on its defense. They're sending more weapons to Ukraine. The people are just cheering it on, like Germans are like little angels. And this guy talking in this language doesn't even, raise any eyebrows or alarm bells around the world. I mean, this guy is talking like the old HRTLER, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, so this guy needs to absolutely shut the hell up. It's because, the Chinese threw some lasers at their aircraft just to let them know that these spy planes, they are easily spotted. I think that's what the Chinese wanted to kind of show them. They're easily spotted, and sometimes they use the excuse of spying against Yemen and they spy against the Chinese instead. And I think what these Germans were doing, they weren't just spying against Yemen. I think they were spying against Chinese ships, because there's a number of Chinese ships on the Red Sea, and there's also a Chinese base in Djibouti as well. So I think Germany was probably spying more on the Chinese ships rather than Yemen. So that could have been why. Um, so yeah, that's all I wanted to say for now, guys. Let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Try and watch the video to the end. So if you reach that far, I really appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care.